All right, so we're mostly all engineers here, right? So we like numbers, right? I started doing a little bit of research just before I talk. I didn't find all the numbers, but 1 out of 11 Americans is living with diabetes. It kind of makes sense, right? We all know somebody. In theory, that means like there's 16 seats per row, so like 1 person per row. I think that makes sense. If we look at asthma, same type of thing, 1 out of 12. We all know somebody that has asthma, right? Like anybody suffers from asthma in the room? Yeah, that pretty much matches the stats. That's fine. Arthritis, we all know, mostly senior people, but some younger people. I'm getting a little bit of gray in my beard, and it starts to hurt a little bit in the morning. Mental illness, 1 out of 5 as well, so more than asthma. That's kind of surprising, though. I also did a little bit of research like I did for Europe, and according to World Health Organization, 1 out of 4 Europeans suffers from depression or anxiety every year. If I ask people to raise their hand, I don't think we would have 1/4 of the people in the room raising their hand. Most people don't talk about it. So it's one of the most prevalent chronic health conditions, but we just never talk about it. We've been taught that we should hide this, and we never talk about that. Today I'm going to talk. That switching is hard. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience. I'm going to talk about my personal story, and I like to talk about mental health in general. Mental health is huge. It covers a lot of ground. It covers a lot of different things, stuff like depression, schizophrenia, OCD. I think there was an uncon about OCD just in the previous session. Unfortunately, I missed it. But I will focus on burnout and on my personal experience. Everybody will experience it in a different way, and I'm going to talk about my own. I am not a mental health professional by any means. The information that I will provide to you today is information that is freely available on the web. Don't come and ask me for advice. We can talk about situations that happen to you. I'll be more than happy. I'll be happy to share the resources that I have, but I am not a professional, so don't take any of what I say as medical advice. But I'm hoping that by talking a little bit about it, I'll be able to help to take down that stigma about mental health, right? Like I said, nobody wants to raise their hand saying, yep, I've suffered from depression in the past. Nobody wants to go in front of a stage and say, yep, I've suffered from burnout. It's a hard thing to do. So we don't want to talk about it, but hopefully by talking about it, we can break down the stigma a little bit and help to have those conversations going. I'm not used about talking to myself. I do a lot of talking, public speaking. It's something that I really enjoy doing, but I talk about technical stuff, which is awesome because you don't have to relate to it in any sort of way. There's no emotions involved. That's easy. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, and we'll see how it goes. It should be fine. Just quickly, nope, the other one. Quickly, just a little bit about me, just so that you know, I'm French Canadian, for starters, hence the charming accent. Yeah. Not as obvious here as in when I travel in the States, but I also always wear the same clothes when I'm at a conference, as you can see. Sometimes, as part of my job, I work as a technical evangelist at Auth0. So we have an identity management platform as a service. Thank you for listening. You're going to pay me for being here now. So we have that. But as my job, I go to different conferences, talk about different stuff. I did a workshop yesterday about React, and I also do a little bit of volunteer work for OSMI, which is an organism called Open Sourcing Mental Illness. They're getting a lot of traction in the US. I think they're getting a little bit more popular now in Europe. Basically, it's a group that is dedicated, or a nonprofit dedicated to change how we talk about mental health in the tech space. And I started working at Auth0 about 18 months ago, just after my burnout. Just before, I almost forgot. Why is it not working? Because it's a PDF. No! I really like Twitter notifications. And I make my own GIFs. So, imagine that it's a GIF of me saying, woohoo! Right. I have 2 or 3, so you'll have to, imagine them. Okay. Okay, burnout. Oh, another animation here. Anyways, okay, burnout. Burnout can be really hard to define. Like I said, I started my job after a very serious burnout. So that was about 18 months ago. I'm feeling much better now. Thank you for asking. Um, it's not like having a flu. It's not like, oh, yesterday I started being sick. I started coughing. You know that it started yesterday, and you know that it's going to end in a week. Flu is easy. Like a lot of physical conditions are really easy to spot, but burnout is really hard. It's not like you can say it started, on day X and will finish in 2 weeks. It's really hard. It's a bit like when you go to a movie theater, and just before they start the movie, they slowly dim the light very, very slowly. And all of a sudden, the movie starts and you realize that you're in the dark, and you never realized that the lights were actually dimming. It just like kind of happened. So it's a little bit like that. Or a little bit like that very fancy animation that you saw, where you didn't necessarily realize when it started. Yeah. Well, it's hard to realize when it actually starts. There's always a point, and I speak with a lot of people after I give this talk, and there's always a point where you realize, okay, like I'm hitting rock bottom at this point. For me, it was one morning I woke up, and it was hard to get out of bed. Getting out of bed was an achievement in itself. And I every 3 or 4 days, I try to get a shower because, social rules. But it was hard, and I had to drag myself all the way to the shower and managed to get in, and I just got into my shower, and I started crying, and I had no clue why. It was just like pouring, and I was crying and crying, and I had no clue what was going on. And I'm a very rational person, right? We're engineers. We're like, okay, we work with logic. We know how things work. And all of a sudden, you just completely lose control over your mind. And it's really freaky experience. And that's what happened. My wife, who was extremely supportive at the time, have been telling me for a while now that something was wrong, that I should go see a doctor. I mean, I had no energy. I couldn't sleep at night, but I was sleepy all day long, of course. I just wasn't smiling anymore. Everything made me angry. And she suggested that I would see a doctor many, many times. But, I'm not weak. I'm a man. I don't have things like burnout. That's weakness, right? And I mean, I was raised that way. I was raised, and my parents are wonderful parents. They're really good. But I mean, when I was a kid, I was taught that boys don't cry. So yeah, that's when I really hit rock bottom. So I'm hoping by talking here, I can help somebody before you reach that point, and you'll be able to go out, get those resources, get that help you'll need. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to try to define a little bit what is burnout. We're going to talk about different things that you can do at your workplace to help people, or things that you can do as a person if you're dealing with stressful situations. And I'm going to give you a few resources at the end. Hopefully we'll finish a little early because I'm pretty much due for a drink now. But all right. What is burnout? What is burnout? Okay, so burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It manifests itself in ways including anxiety, loss of motivation, confidence, and even degradation of physical health. It's actually very serious, Burnout mimics depression symptoms, so it's oftentimes very hard to see the distinction between the two. In my case, I had no motivation whatsoever. I didn't want to do anything. Like I said, getting out of the bed was hard. I spoke with people yesterday, and they're telling me one of the things that happened to them is that they would just sit in front of their computer for a full working day and do nothing. They would just stare at the screen. They just didn't have the energy of doing anything. Anxiety, I started getting panic attacks, getting physically sick. I caught a flu that lasted for over a month, and I just couldn't get over it. I had nausea. I literally went to, is Costco a thing here? Like it's like those big warehouses where you can buy like boxes of toilet paper and whatever. And I bought like Tums, like big bottles of Tums, because I would just eat Tums like all day long because I had so much heartburns. Trouble controlling my emotions. That was the weirdest part, probably one of the hardest part. I had a roller coaster of emotion all the time, but like all negative emotion. I would be angry. I just want to pick a fight with everyone. I was always so frustrated about anything. Somebody would suggest a change. That would be like, no, please. And then all of a sudden I'd be sad and I'd start crying. And I was like, okay, come on, get over it. And then aggressiveness. I was so aggressive. I would pick a fight. We had an all-hands meeting, like all the company. I was one of the directors there, and our general manager was showing us numbers. And I started questioning him in front of everyone and just drilling him in front of the whole company about some of the numbers for absolutely no reason. And people would talk to me about it, and they were like, what the hell is going on with you? But it was like that. I was just impatient, discourse, like all those negative emotions all the time. And it's weird, like I said, you just don't have the control over them anymore. But the worst was lack of motivation, nothing. I didn't want to do anything. Friends would call me to go out for a drink, and if you know me now, you know that I'm always in for a drink. But I would always find an excuse. There was always something up. I just didn't have the energy to do nothing. Weekends were pretty much spent, watching Netflix in the bed. Someone once told me that motivation and willpower is a limited resource. Right? You wake up in the morning, you have a bucket full of willpower, and it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with that. So you start your day, and that's why they always say you should, if like all the stuff that you don't really want to do, training, physical stuff, reading your emails in the morning, you should always do that very early on in the morning because you still have some of that willpower left in your bucket. And every time you do one of those activities, there's a little bit of water that comes out. And by the end of the day, you don't have a lot of willpower left. And sometimes it happens. I don't know if any of you have kids. If you have young kids, it'll happen. They'll keep you up all night. So that next morning, that bucket is a little bit smaller. Maybe you had a conference and you have a speaker dinner the night before your presentation. That bucket's a little bit smaller. It happens. Sometimes you have large buckets, sometimes small bucket, but we're all able to deal with that naturally. When you're burnt out, it's pretty much like that bucket is just full of holes. You wake up in the morning, and it's like, gotta get out of bed. And like you lose half the bucket of willpower right there. And then you start thinking, and you have that anxiety about all the horrible things that will happen today. And then everything's like an impossible task. And then, I gotta take a shower. And then, I gotta go to work. And then you're stuck in the traffic. And by then, you're already like, put your damn turn signal, you idiot. And light is green, come. And I would get to the office, and I'd be exhausted, right? And no more energy, because I spent all of the energy that I had on those futile things. So, where does it come from? Burnout can be prevalent in organizations that promote hero culture, and where employees maintain a strong sense of duty or feel they have no alternative in the employment market. That is often the case in the tech industry. It's an industry that highly promotes that hero culture. They pay us typically very well, so that you don't feel like you should leave. And there's also this whole mentality of always being connected, and you've got all that pressure of always having a new email that comes in at 9 in the evening, so you have to answer it. And things are moving like 200 miles an hour, or 200 kilometers an hour, yeah. So, and there's like all these things that you feel like you need to do all the time. You feel like you're pressured into doing those 70 hours a week, and it's still not enough. So the tech industry tends to be very prone to promoting all of that culture that leads to burnout. False sense of responsibility was also a big thing in my case. Like I said, I was director level, but I had absolutely no power of changing anything, so I was just always fighting and always banging against walls. So that can be very hard. So yeah, didn't have a lot of power to change anything, and the concept of meritocracy, like I said, which is somewhat important, but definitely not all that should count. So burnout is actually an official disease. It's listed as a disease in ICD, which is a American thing. Actually was officially considered a real disease by the World Health Organization last week, so May 28th. And it can be diagnosed with the Maslach burnout inventory, which is just a test with a few questions. They'll ask you, how do you feel about this from 0 to 6? The questions themselves depend on your profession, your age, your gender, and all that stuff. If you go to see a doctor, something that is very important is to try to be honest. The first time I went to see a doctor to talk about my situation, they'll ask you questions like, okay, well, are you having difficulties getting along with your colleagues? And I was like, well, I got into a fight twice today, so that's like 10 minutes out of 24 hours, so rarely. And we were like that. We're really in denial. When you're in that mindset, you start to get into a denial state. So it's important that you actually take some time and realize what you're answering those questions. If you're unsure if you should see a doctor or not, the Mayo Clinic suggests a quick survey with those questions. Things like, have you become cynical or critical at work? Do you drag yourself out to work and have trouble getting started once you arrive? Have you become irritable or impatient with your coworkers, customers, or clients? I think I gave you examples from all of those already. Do you lack the energy to be consistently productive? Have your sleep habits or appetite changed? Are you troubled by unexplained headaches, backaches, or other physical complaints? Like I said, it can actually have an impact on your physical health as well. So if you answered yes to one of those questions, according to the Mayo Clinic, you should talk to your doctor and consult to see if there's maybe something wrong. Now, it doesn't mean that there's something. A lot of those symptoms can also indicate some specific health conditions, such as thyroid disorder or depression, but it's important that you start checking with somebody or a health professional if you're experiencing any of those. All right, so what to do? What to do when you're rock bottom, you're feeling this way? First of all, talk to a doctor. That's the first thing that you should always do. They are trained to detect the symptoms. They are trained to deal with that. They might recommend medication. If they do, you should probably take it. I know there's a lot of fear around medication, especially things that is meant for mental health. Ask questions. They are there to answer those questions. If you're worried that it might be addictive, ask them what it's for. Maybe it's for anxiety, maybe it's to help you sleep. There's a bunch of things that they can help you with. Go see your doctor and ask the questions. That's very important. I had a little bit of medication. It helped me just to get over that bump and get a little bit better until a point where I was able to progress by myself. But in my case, it really did help. It was non-addictive, and it was a very temporary situation. Also, if they will probably recommend to speak to a psychologist. Do so. It's a very interesting process. And make sure that you shop your doctors. Don't just go to one and assume that this is how it's going to be. Find somebody that you're comfortable with. It's something that we often neglect, but it's very, very important. All right. What else can you do? Do some introspection. Try to figure out what are the triggers. Maybe it comes from you. A lot of time it comes from yourself. You're putting yourself a lot too much pressure. You're just accepting everything and trying to improve yourself in your business or environment. Maybe it's external pressure. Maybe you're not supported at work. Maybe there are different things. But try to take some time and don't try to find somebody to blame. That's not going to help. But try to figure out what are the triggers. What is it that really has an impact on you? Take a break. Much easier said than done. I'll give you that. If you are able to take long periods of time off, please do so. I used to work in a company where we had unlimited vacation, which obviously turns out to taking no vacation whatsoever. But if you can, take it. Take it, take it. If you cannot take a full month off, like most people, take a weekend. Take a weekend or a long weekend and disconnect. Leave your phone at home, stop answering those emails, just disconnect. It makes a big difference. Try to do a little bit less. Also, easier said than done. But there are things that most people can actually delegate. There are some things that maybe your spouse can help you with little tasks that she doesn't normally do, she or he doesn't normally do. Maybe there are little things. My wife and I, when I started dating, I wanted to impress her, and I was trying to cook a meal every now and then, and I absolutely hate it. We're just getting together and starting to live together, and it turns out I hate cooking. I absolutely hate it, and she absolutely loves it. So now she does all the cooking. And I actually enjoy doing the dishes after a meal. I think it's a very relaxing moment in my day, and I like to do that. So we split those tasks, and that helped me a lot. Like I don't have to do that cooking that I absolutely hate, and I get to do the actual jobs that I love. So have a conversation, see if you can do a little bit less. Maybe, if you're in a professional level, ask someone else to do the code review that you've just been assigned. Sometimes it's very good to assign a junior to do a code review of a senior code. It's not because you're the team lead that you have to take on all the code reviews, especially of the experienced developers. It's great when you can actually assign a junior to do those. They'll raise up a lot of questions and a lot of things that will actually question the senior developers a lot more than you would. Say no. I am absolutely horrible at that. I was just telling somebody that this week has been crazy because I'm here at a conference. I was at a conference last week. I'm changing job next week, so I have to transition all of my stuff. So I've been waking up at 6 in the morning, and I have meetings until 11. I just cannot say no. It's hard, but you don't need to be a superhero. Just stop at least volunteering for everything that comes by. Save your fucks. That's an important one. You cannot care about everything. You won't win all the fights. Pick the fights, pick your fights, pick the ones that you can win, and bring them to an end. Very important. You have a limited number of fucks that you can give in a day, so use them wisely. Ask for help. It's so important and so hard. From a professional point of view, of course, but also from your friend, your spouse, your family. When you're depressed, it's very easy to close yourself. And you get into that mood where you don't want to do anything and you just don't talk to any of your friends anymore. Find your real friends, kick yourself in the butt, and go out for a coffee with them and talk to them. Find somebody that you trust and actually talk to them. Be honest and tell them that you're not feeling well, and that's why you're not returning their calls most of the time. And you might get some unsupported help from some of them. Do some exercise. All doctors will definitely prescribe you to do some exercise. All right. I'd say find something you like. Exercise is good. Don't get me wrong. It does serotonin chemicals in your brain. But I'd say find something that you like. For me, I found a hobby. I enjoy brewing beer. That's the best thing in the world. I started brewing beer with my cousin and my brother here. And that was pretty much the only activity where I'd actually put up an alarm and get out of bed. I would be there at 6:30 in the morning, and it's a full day. We do 80 liters batches, 20-gallon batches. So basically, you spend a day sitting there, watching some water boil, shooting the shit with my cousin, and, drinking a lot of beer. And it was definitely the only thing that motivated me in the morning. And it was also, after I did a full day of brewing, I slept so well. It was one of the very rare times that I could actually get some very good sleep. Might have been due to the beer, but I think it was because of the activity. All right, so what can you do? If you, as an employer, try to enable remote work if you can, if you have any saying in that. I've worked for places where they would not allow remote work, and the official reason in the employee's guide was the managers cannot supervise the work of the employee or cannot guarantee how much work the employees will do when they work from home. That is the stupidest thing ever. Remote workers, it's been proven many times, will actually produce more. They'll do more work than what they do in an office. And by enabling people to do remote work, you remove a little bit of that stigma. You let them, if they need to go for a doctor's appointment, if they have some personal things to deal with, they can take some time and they don't necessarily need to justify. Especially in our line of work, we're programmers. Nobody's going to really notice if you leave the computer for an hour. You kind of don't have to shout it all over the place. Offer some personal time off. Once again, if you have a saying in that, make sure that your employees can take some sick days, sick leaves. Have an employee assistance program. That's a very important one. We have that most places in Canada now. Most large companies offer this. I'm not sure if it's very popular here in Europe, but it's basically just a phone number that they'll give you. It is anonymous, and you can just call and say, hey, you know what, I work for this company. Here's the number of the company, and I just need to help. I need to speak with a psychologist. I need to deal with some stuff, and I just need to get some stuff off of my chest, and they'll book you appointments, and they'll book you for typically not a large amount, but at least to help you out a little bit. If you do offer that type of program, because I've seen that at my previous employer, they did offer it, and they had a very nice open floor plan, right? And right in the middle, there was a post, and they had a poster with the phone number where you could call for the employee assistance program. Now, the thing is, nobody wants to get up during the day, go right in the middle of the open floor plan, and take a picture so that they can call later. That's not going to happen. So if you do offer this type of program, make sure that the information is available to your employees, and make sure that it's available in a place where they do have some privacy to actually take note of the phone number. Mental health first aid kit is available. There's a program in the Netherlands available, so you can take a look. I'll have a link for all those resources afterwards. But it's a training, basically the same thing as a first aid offered by the Red Cross, but for mental health issues in the workplace. And OSMI also has a very good guideline for mental wellness in the workplace oriented towards people in tech. If you're a manager, lead by example. Don't send emails at 2 in the morning. Don't tell me that, oh no, they don't need to answer right now. No, people feel pressured when they receive an email in the middle of the night. They feel pressured and they feel the need to answer the email at 2 in the morning, or they'll feel the need the next day to actually send an email at 1 in the morning also, just to prove that they also work during the night. Take your days off, especially if you have unlimited vacation policies. Make sure that you take your days off and that you tell everybody that you're taking your days off. Make sure that everyone in your team knows about it so that they don't feel bad taking a day off. And talk about mental health in your workplace. If you've experienced some things, talk about it. Even if you didn't, you can just try to get the conversation going whenever you can. For your colleagues, language matters. Be careful about the terms that you use, especially when we talk about general mental health. Things like, oh, are you schizo? Are you crazy? Words like that can be hurtful sometimes. Be aware of those. Be careful of those. Educate yourself if you want. There's a great toolkit by Bell Canada that was displayed there. Just be kind in general. Don't be an ass. And break the silence. If you see something, talk to someone. Talk to someone, but be careful about the word that you're going to choose. Don't say things like, you'll get over it. That's not very helpful, especially when you're feeling like really, really down. But like, oh, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, or can I do anything to help you out? Is there anything I can do to help you? And offer help, but don't question people, don't judge people. All right, so this is called post-burnout. So burnout is not only negative. It was a very bad thing in my life, in my personal, both personal and professional. But it actually helped me to find this awesome job. It's the one thing that actually really kicked me when I started realizing how bad everything was, how toxic that environment was. Well, I decided to actually start looking for a new job, and I got this awesome gig, which lets me travel to Amsterdam, which is really cool. It brought me so much closer to my friends and family. I started having those conversations, and especially with some of my close friends. And out of nowhere, they would just drop by my place and help me out with some of the stuff around the house. And it was ridiculous things. Like, it's just two of my very good friends just came at my place, and they were like, "Hey, Joel, we're here. We're gonna change your tires on your car," because we change tires during winter. And it's not a big deal. It's a thing that takes like 20 minutes maybe. But like, just that little thing that they did for me was, yeah, really touching. And overall, I have a much better balanced life. I try to be careful. I try to say no some of the times. But I try to balance things. I try to make sure that I actually enjoy what I do, that I have fun with the different things that I do. Christopher Noring, one of my speaker friends, once said in one of his talks, "You don't get burnt out by working for you. You get worked out by working for someone who doesn't appreciate your work." So if you've got to put in extra hours, if you're a little bit tired, but there's one little thing that you want to do, if it's brewing beer, you're doing that for you. Yeah, sure, you're going to be a little bit tired and hungover the next day, but that's fine. As long as you do it for you, that's good. So why I talk about this, it's really all about ending the stigma. Like I said, I want to get those conversations going. If you want to talk with me, I'll be always happy to have a conversation. With this, I'll leave you with some resources that you can take a look at. So the OSMI website, very interesting. There's one link to download all of those links. Mental health first aid kit, interesting stuff. Bell Canada's Let's Talk, which is a guide about how to have conversations with some of your colleagues that might be suffering from mental health conditions. And lastly, I really want to talk about this podcast that I've watched, that I've listened to last week. It's a very, very powerful podcast, which is called Hey You. And episode 8, which just came out, was about mental health awareness. And there's somebody relatively well known in the community. I just don't want to point him out, but and he talks about his own experience, and it's very, very powerful. So on this, that's a gif of me saying bye. On this, I will not be taking any questions. It's a very personal subject, and I am not comfortable answering questions at large like this. But I'll be very happy. Yeah, that's the one. I'll be very happy to have a conversation with any of you if you're interested. Come and talk to me. I'll stick around today, and I'm usually very easy to find because I wear a bright red hoodie. Thank you very much for being here, and that's the link for all the slides and everything.